Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the muddy, crumbly, slightly moldy world of medieval cuisine. Picture this. It's dawn in a tiny, damp cottage. Outside, a rooster caws like he's auditioning for an off-key choir. You sit up on a straw mattress that crunches suspiciously. The fire's gone cold, your feet are freezing, and breakfast, if you can call it that, is bubbling, faintly in a soot-blackened pot. It's gruel. Again. Congratulations, you've survived the night. You probably won't survive the week. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge to the hearth. The smell hits you first. A kind of fermented porridge aroma, mixed with damp wood ash and something faintly goat-like. That's breakfast, a bowl of gruel, made from barley or oats, whichever grew best in the soggy corner of your lord's land. If you're lucky, it's warm. If not, it's yesterday's leftovers, congealed into a heroic blob that jiggles more than it should. Gruel is essentially cereal's depressed cousin, made by boiling ground grains in water or, when available, thin broth or ale. No sugar, no cinnamon swirl, no crunch. Just beige mush. It's the kind of thing you eat slowly, because you're hoping it will become something else by the time you swallow. You wash it down with small beer, a low-alcohol ale that even children drink, since the water could kill you faster than a sword fight. Brewed weak, drunk often, and barely distinguishable from warm-bread soup. Small beer is less of a beverage and more of a survival tactic. Historians still argue whether small beer provided meaningful nutrition, or if it was more about hydration, but in any case, it wasn't refreshing. It was what you had. Every morning, sometimes all day. By midweek, your stomach would beg for variety, but your pantry would shrug apologetically. Now, if you lived near a monastery or were a monk yourself, you might fare slightly better. Monks had access to better gardens and often made decent cheese. But for the average peasant, your chances of dairy at breakfast were slim, milk didn't keep, and butter was often too valuable to eat freely, unless it had turned, in which case, bon appétit. Let's talk about teeth. Because that simple breakfast, it's secretly a dental horror story. Medieval milling techniques weren't exactly refined. The grindstones used to pulverize barley and oats shed tiny particles of stone into the flour. Over time, you weren't just eating porridge, you were sandpapering your molars into submission. If you were wondering why everyone seemed to age, like a broken scarecrow in medieval times, this didn't help. You start to notice as you chew your bland gruel that it's less about taste and more about not cutting the inside of your mouth on a pebble. The concept of crunchy was not intentional. It was geological. And breakfast wasn't optional. With so few calories in every mouthful, skipping a meal could make the difference between staying upright or fainting into a ditch. So you choke down every spoonful, even when it's cold, gritty, and vaguely tastes like damp sackcloth. As you sit by the fire, steam rising from your bowl, your neighbor might stop by. He's chewing a dry hunk of something that might once have been bread, now the density of roof tile. He offers you a bite. You politely decline. He nods, showing off his one remaining tooth like it's a badge of culinary honor. It's hard not to laugh gently, of course, at the idea of breakfast foods back then. There were no pancakes, no orange juice, no eggs over easy. Even chickens, those breakfast MVPs, were more valuable for their eggs or meat than for fueling your morning routine. You might get an egg once a week if you're lucky. Twice, and someone probably died. Still, you count your blessings. You're not in the middle of a famine. There's something warm in your belly, even if it tastes like punishment. And there's always the possibility that today might bring something better, some dried beans, maybe a radish if the garden's kind. But you know that deep down, breakfast has already set the tone. Bland, meager, and just enough to keep you shuffling forward. There's a kind of sleepy resilience in it all. This was a world where survival didn't mean thriving, but enduring. And in every spoonful of that pale porridge, there was centuries of hardship, clever improvisation, and stubborn hope. So you finish your bowl, wipe your mouth on your sleeve, no napkins here, and step outside into the misty morning. Another day, another chance to find slightly less terrible food. You haven't made it far down the muddy lane before the thought hits you. Bread. You need bread, something to sop up the sour aftertaste of gruel and make the day feel slightly more solid. But medieval bread, much like medieval life, is not what you'd call uplifting. At first glance, it looks promising, round, hearty loaves stacked high in a communal oven or a neighbor's basket. But take a bite, and reality crunches back, literally. That's not a surprise. Raisin you just crunched? It's grit. Welcome to the wonderful world of bread, milled with millstones that shed, flakes of stone, like a nervous snake in molting season. Most flour, especially in peasant villages, wasn't sifted. That meant your daily bread was packed with more than just nutrients. It had minerals all right, just not the dietary kind. Dentists weren't a thing, so you're essentially self-dentisting with every bite. Your teeth, slowly ground down by a lifetime of chewing what amounts to edible sandpaper. Thank you by loosening politely and exiting your gums around age 35. But before you despair, know this. Not all bread was created equal. If you were rich, and let's face it, you aren't, you might enjoy something called manchet, a fine white bread made from sifted flour. It's light, fluffy, and requires 0 molar sacrifices. Only problem? It cost a fortune and was usually reserved for the nobility or high-ranking clergy, who also had the good sense to eat. They're bread with butter, imported from Normandy. Instead, your bread is maslin, a cheerful medieval mashup of rye, barley, and whatever else wasn't eaten by mice this week. Dark, dense, and vaguely fungal smelling, it's nourishing but grim. If it's been sitting out a few days, which it has, it hardens into what can only be described as edible pottery. Bread also doubled as a utensil. In wealthier households, especially during feasts, stale hunks called trenchers were used as plates. The grease and meat juices from the meal would soak into the bread, which was then either eaten or handed to the poor. You know, as a kind of saucy second-hand donation. Here, peasant, enjoy this meat-sweated sponge I used as a plate. How generous. Historians still argue whether trenchers were ever really eaten by nobles themselves, or if that idea is more romantic hindsight than habit. But we do know the bottom of every social ladder started with bread. Coarser, older, harder as you went down. And bread didn't always come from the oven. In some places, especially during food shortages, it was baked over an open hearth on flat stones or iron plates. That is, if you even had flour. In desperate times, people mixed acorns, bark, or peas into their dough. Pea bread. Just let that one sit with you. The church, never one to miss a food moment, also inserted itself into the bread business. Holy bread was offered at Mass, and in some towns, baking bread on Sundays was frowned upon, or outright banned except by licensed bakers. Break the rule and you could be fined. Now imagine being a baker during this time. Your flour had to meet guild standards. Your oven might be inspected. And God help you if you tried to sneak a bit of the good stuff home. Bakers were sometimes publicly shamed or even put in the pillory for selling short-weight loaves. Talk about a job with crusty expectations. And let's not forget how long it took to make bread. There were no timers or stand mixers. You mixed your dough by hand, kneaded it on a flour-caked slab, and left it near the hearth to rise. Slowly. Yeast? Well, yes, but not the tidy little packets we have now. You used wild yeast, sometimes from old dough or fermented mash, which means every loaf was a gamble. Will it rise? Will it taste okay? Or will it emerge smelling like someone's bad foot wrapped in barley? Still, despite everything, bread was life. You couldn't avoid it. Taxes were paid in grain, wages were calculated in bread allowance. Even revolts were sparked over the price of loaves. People might tolerate a lot. Plague, war, crooked clergy, but take away their bread. You'd have riots faster than you could say sourdough starter, and so you tuck a chunk of that rough, tooth-challenging loaf into your satchel. It will be your lunch. Maybe dinner, too, and tomorrow's breakfast, and probably next Tuesday's emergency snack. It's hard, it's gritty, and it could double as a murder weapon in the right hands, but it's yours. And as you chew through the crust, and try not to wince at the mineral, surprise inside, you tell yourself something every medieval eater probably muttered at some point. By midday, you've had your fill of chewing on what feels like gravel-studded insulation. So you start fantasizing about meat, something juicy, maybe roasted, or at least something that didn't begin its life as porridge. Unfortunately, in medieval times, meat wasn't just rare, it was often a gamble. And not the fun kind. More like a will this give me food poisoning kind of wager. Let's start with accessibility. If you're a peasant, which statistically, you are, meat isn't something you eat every day. It's not even a once-a-week luxury. It's more like a birthday surprise or post-harvest miracle. Livestock were too valuable alive. Pigs rooted through trash. Chickens laid eggs and cows gave milk. Killing one was a serious economic decision. It was like choosing between eating a meal or keeping your version of a refrigerator. Now nobles did eat meat, and lots of it. Deer, boar, swan, peacock, even porpoise if you were near the coast and particularly adventurous. But even their cuts weren't exactly safe. Preservation methods were primitive at best. Salted meats could keep, sure, but they also picked up flavors from whatever they were stored in. Imagine a pork leg that tastes like the inside of a barrel, mixed with dust and last summer's regrets. Fresh meat? Well, that was a ticking clock. With no refrigeration and a warm summer day, your venison stew might come with a side of intestinal regret. Spoilage was common, and meat days often depended more on the weather than the menu. Historians still argue whether medieval cooks could reliably mask the taste of spoilage with spices, or if people just developed a higher tolerance for food that smelled like feet. And about those spices, yes, they were available for the rich. Imported from distant lands like India or North Africa, pepper, cinnamon, and cloves cost a small fortune. Sometimes, nobles would slather old meat with enough spice and vinegar to burn through the mold and mask the taste. You, meanwhile, would probably settle for some garlic or wild, mustard scraped from a field and hope for the best. Back to your situation. It's a feast day, which means, miracle of miracles, there's pork in the pot. You watch with watery eyes as the village cook hacks off a piece, with a cleaver that might once have been a sword. The cut sizzles faintly, most likely from yesterday's. Grease still stuck to the pan. The smell is glorious. The texture? Less so. You bite down and are immediately reminded that pigs were often slaughtered in the fall and preserved for winter. So this particular chunk of meat might have been hanging in a smoky attic for months. Or maybe it's from a pig that died under suspicious circumstances. In some towns, animals could be legally executed for causing accidents or stealing food. Think about that. A pig on trial. History is weird. Anyway, this pork tastes, okay, salty, tough, a little spongy. You chew slowly, hoping the fibers dissolve eventually. The cook tells you it's been boiled 3 times to soften it up. You're not sure if that's comforting or a warning. Let's say you're lucky enough to be visiting a castle. Now you're seeing meat in theatrical quantities. Whole roasted animals presented on giant platters. Birds with feathers reattached for decoration. Meat pies the size of your torso. But look closer and it's not all glitz. Those elaborate dishes often masked less than fresh ingredients. And cooks didn't exactly have thermometers or sanitation protocols. There's also a fair chance you're served something you can't identify. Some mystery meat that's been cooked, minced, spiced, and tucked inside pastry with absolutely zero concern for labeling. Could be rabbit. Could be squirrel. Could be whatever Sir Geoffrey hit with a rock this morning. Still, you eat it. Because meat is rare. Meat means energy. Meat means you might not fall over from hunger in the fields tomorrow. And if it gives you a stomachache, well, that's the price of medieval luxury. Forks? Don't even ask. You're tearing into that sinewy chunk with your fingers, just like everyone else. Even the nobles mostly use knives and hands. Finger bowls might be passed around, if you're lucky, but there's a good chance. You're wiping your hands on your tunic and pretending not to care that everything smells faintly of pig fat and onions. And speaking of onions, those were often used to flavor meat, not just for taste, but to hide any lingering funk. If the onion didn't help, vinegar was next. Lots and lots of vinegar. Medieval people didn't think of food as fresh and simple. They thought of it as robust, heavy, seasoned into submission, and best eaten quickly before it walked away on its own. So you finish your piece of pork, take a long drink of small beer to wash it down, and sit back. You're full, for now. But deep down you know it's a temporary truce. The meat giveth, and tomorrow your bowels may taketh away. Still, it was a good meal. You probably won't see another like it this month. Your belly is full, for now, and the sun is beginning to droop low behind the thatched rooftops. You feel the gentle ache of digestion setting in, like a slow-burning candle in your middle. That pork you ate? It might have been the highlight of the week. But before you let your mind drift into an early nap, someone hands you a bowl. Soup, again. But not the thick, creamy, comforting kind you might picture in modern kitchens. No, this is pottage, a dish that could be called soup's less glamorous medieval cousin. Picture a grayish-brown slurry with the occasional fleck of barley or cabbage.